Welcome to Prophets and Prophecy. I appreciate you being with us as we open the Word of God and we look at current events and we look past the horizon to what's on the morrow. Now, prophets have a unique gift, unique calling, and that is that God whispers in their ear in the last day to tell the people, "Thus saith the Lord." Now, remember this. Prophets are not given to huge crowds. They're not given to fame and accolades. They are called to be obedient in the last day. Now, what do you mean by obedient? Prophets do not walk by faith. They walk by calling. And the Word of God tells us in Amos 3 and 5, in the last days, He said, "I will whisper in the ear of my prophets before I do anything, so that my people will not be afraid or led astray." The prophet's obligation is to hear from God and then tell it to the people as God instructs him. Now, I know there are a lot of ministries on the air today, and I know there are a lot of people that are talking about prophecy. But prophecy is not telling things that have happened or even things that are happening now. Teachers and historians can share historical events. Pundits can tell you what the news is and what's going on in their world around them. But prophets were called to tell you what shall be, and this too must come to pass. That's a prophet's calling. So as we go forward today, I want you to understand that we are going to mention some current events, but that's not the crux of this message. So bear with us. You see, we could be talking about the Ukraine and Russian war. We could be talking about China and its involvement. We could be talking about the gold standard. We could be talking about nuclear war. In fact, on most of the media stations now, the word nuclear attack, tactical nuclear warheads, biochemical warfare, World War III, all of these words, all of these statements keep coming to the fore. But we need to understand where we are and understand what God has in store for the church. Now, there are things that we deal with because we live here. It's called life. We're looking at shortages. We're looking at food shortage. We're looking at famine. We are looking at two of the largest producing areas for food in the world, one being the Ukraine, and they're missing their planting season right now because they are at war. We talk about the San Joaquin Valley, and they are missing some of their planting seasons because of the lack of water. What does that do? That trickles on down to where you and I walk into a grocery store, and instead of seeing prosperity as we always have, we see empty shelves. I've had people tell me, "Brother Haygood, what should I do?" Well, the obvious thing is that you buy as much as you can, put it back for those that you are responsible for, those that you love, and prepare for the worst and be ready for whatever God brings. Now you say, why prepare for the worst? Because if the worst does not come and you're over-prepared, there's not a thing in the world wrong with that. Just be wise. We also know the gas prices. We could talk about that. Oh my goodness, can we talk about that? There are so many ramifications on why gas is so high, why America is not the number one producing country in the world as it used to be. But we won't get into the politics of that. There are some things that I will share with you that are on the horizon. Number one, I hear from my sources in Europe and also in America that this coming Tuesday, April the 5th, the World Bank has given the United States an ultimatum. Either go back on the gold standard or risk being dropped as the world reserve currency at the bank, the World Bank. You say, Brother Haygood, what is that? That's where nations trade. If, for instance, I want to buy rubles. I take dollars, give it to them, they get rubles for me. Or if I want to buy wine from China, I take my American dollars there, or I take my rubles that I just bought back to the World Bank. They in turn exchange it for currencies around the world. And the United States currency has been the criteria for the World Bank since World War II. The whole world judged their currency by our dollar. But right now we have runaway inflation. In fact, they're saying here in America, they say it's 8%. In Europe, they estimate that it's over 17% inflation. So they gave the ultimatum to our government. As of April the 5th, midnight, if you have not decided to go back on the gold standard, your currency is going to drop in value. You say, well, what about China? What about Russia? China and Russia in 2018 began to sell all of their U.S. Treasury notes at a discount and buy gold. Right now, you have some of the major players in this war game that we're looking at, worldwide war, that hold gold in abundance. I think they were predicting that the dollar would fail. China, 10 years ago, set out to destroy America's credibility in the World Bank. And China wants to be the currency of record, that everyone will judge their economy by China and also fear China because of the amassed groups of fighters and what I call war fighters or real soldiers that they could bring to the table. Right now we are in a desperate struggle, and it seems that we are floundering in an ocean of hostility and deceit, and we have no leader. Pray for America. We need a leader right now. We could also be talking about inflation. We could be talking about moral depravity. You know, moral depravity is not exclusive to America, but it seems like it's highlighted in our life because it deals with us, our children, our future. To me, it's a sad thing when you turn your television on and you see mixed couples, gay, lesbian, homosexual, and they blatantly throw it in our face. We have a cabinet member, in fact, we have 3 cabinet members that relate to that type of relationship and that lifestyle, that kiss their spouses in public and set an example for children. And speaking of children, it's moral depravity when a 3rd grader comes home and tells her mother, I get to be a transgender. Where did you hear that? Oh, the teacher told us it was such a great thing to be transgender. When the parents got to the school, they found out their 3rd grade daughter had been listed in a transgender course and not even notified the parent. That's moral depravity. That's deceit at all ranks, at all heights. It's just where we are right now. What do you say about that? The Bible said in the last days you would see that. I think it was Romans 1 said, whereas they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God turned them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which were not convenient, who not only did the same, but took pleasure in them that did them. Man with man, woman with woman. It doesn't get any clearer than that. Moral depravity. We have a candidate for the Supreme Court that is not going to voice her opinion on what a woman is. Now, I would like to say this going in. She has a child, she has a husband, she has all of the anatomy required to reproduce after its own kind. And she doesn't know what a woman is? Or better yet, maybe she does, but it doesn't fit the political scope of those that are supporting her. I would hate to think that we had somebody on the Supreme Court that's already been contaminated by the powers that support her, what will she rule on something of real consequence to the American people other than the sex of a woman? You can't trust someone who will not answer a question. Are you a woman? Well, I'm not biologically equipped to answer that question. Honey, you are biologically equipped. You just don't want to admit it. That's moral depravity. You know, we have civil unrest in America right now. Civil unrest to the point that we are on the verge of a civil war. In California right now, the new governor out there and others in their legislature are talking with people about reformation of property. You have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of slaves that were brought here from Africa. And they say the property that the white man is living on belongs to them because they were never paid for it. Well, if you do reformation and you give California to the dissenters and to the civil disorder groups, and they get all of the property that they think that they were cheated out of, then you've got to go one step further with reformation, and you've got to give it back to my ancestors. Because you see, we were here before the white man, the brown man, or the black man. So any land that they inhabit belongs to us, the American Indian. Reformation is a sharp card to play, but it plays both ways. You say, Brother Haygood, you're trying to cause civil unrest. No, I'm telling you where the civil unrest is. Those that backed Black Lives Matter found out they were scammed. The leaders, the women that started Black Lives Matter, are now in other countries on islands that have no jurisdiction. They are living in million-dollar mansions. And here, before the Black Lives Matter movement, they were on welfare. Tell me how that works. I'm not real sure how to explain that. Where did all the money go? For all of you that donated to these groups, I feel sorry for you because they took your money, raised the crime rate, had a false flag flying one way as they walked out the door with all the cash the other way. That's moral depravity. That's civil unrest. We are in the middle right now of trying to find out. A treaty with Iran was reached using Russia as the arbitrators to find out what they obligated us to. Now, I will tell you one thing. I've got friends in the Mossad that are telling me this. If Iran gets their way and this treaty goes through, they will create a nuclear weapon that they will use against Israel and America. They've already said that Americans are devils, that we must die, and that Israelis are trespassing on their heritage, and they're going to take it back one way or the other. There's one thing about a nuclear war that people don't understand. It's like a circular firing squad. There's no winner. If you fire a rocket at me, I fire one back at you. You fire two at me, I fire five back at you. When you get all the rockets fired and in the air, humanity is endangered once again, that we might face a type of extinction, not just in the initial blast area, but also with the radiation and fallout around the world. Radiation doesn't go away like the winter wind. It hangs around to kill. We could talk about that. But really, the thing that I want to talk about right now is the fact that America is gearing up for war. The Pentagon this week has discussed and drawn up temporary legislation to renew the draft. And our children from 18 to 25 could be called up at a moment's notice, not only to build an army, but to fill the holes that Mr. Biden created in the military with his vaccination indictments. We have men that we had $1 million in apiece in training to fly, to operate scientific equipment, to lead men. Their training far surpassed anything else that the world has to offer. and he ushered them out of the military because they would not bow and bend to his mandate. He's got to replace them. He's got to replace the cannon fodder, the young 18-year-olds with a gun, and they feel invincible. To do that, he's going to institute the draft. You say, when? They're talking about it now. When we talked about, like I said, the gold standard and America meeting that. This is a big week in America, but that's really not where I want to go. See, we could sit down, and each one of those topics is a complete lesson within itself. But I want to talk to you about what's going on behind the false flags, behind the wag the dog mentality. The world that we live in today started changing in 1957. Russia launched Sputnik. When they launched Sputnik, Eisenhower and the cabinet and the chief of staff all got together, and they decided that America was going to be left in the dust if we didn't do something quick. We developed a space program, we developed a financial program, and then, not quite as loudly as it should have been, there was the birth of a new program. It was called the ARPA. Say it with me, ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency. Now, ARPA had a great funding. It was supposed to take us technically ahead of the Russians. It was supposed to keep us abreast with current events and circumvent any shortfalls that might be in the way. As ARPA began to develop programs, there was an interesting uncle looking over their shoulder. It was called the Department of Defense. They came in and changed ARPA to DARPA. That was the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Now they had a group of scientists, the best in the world, and they had an unlimited budget furnished to them by Congress, and they went forth to keep us ahead of what might be called our enemies, the other state nations that were trying to get ahead of us. What was the goal? To control the people. Now, they did some crazy things. And like I said, some of this is going to be a little science fiction for some of you, but it's still true. In fact, we're actually not ahead of the curve, and this is not cutting edge. This is Freedom of Information Act, which means it's already happening. And we can't cover it all today, but we'll start. In 1957, when Sputnik was launched, and ARPA started up, taken over by the Defense Ministry to become DARPA, they started looking at things that movies are made out of. Remember the Manchurian Candidate. Remember, the Minority Report, The Matrix, The Terminator. We'll cover all of those. Those are prototypes of what happens in real life in DARPA. Now, they were trying to capture energy that could not be controlled by the enemy. And somebody came up with the idea that there were psychics, prophets, and even sorcerers that could help the military. They started rounding up people they thought that had extra sensory powers. I had a friend that was in that group. What they wanted him to do was sit in a room remotely from someone else with no cameras, no microphones, and the individual in the adjacent room would hold up a card, and they wanted him to tell what card it was. Now you say, Brother Good, why would they be interested in that? Because they had in their grasp information that the Russians had people like this that could actually kill someone from another continent with no physical contact. No gimmicks, no tricks. They were successful to a point, but they thought if they could get someone that can control mental energy, they could actually cause the enemy that we could fight and could face to die. And you know what? Sometimes it worked, but it was not consistent. Realizing that there was a mental energy that could be captured, we call it the spirit of the man, or the power or the soul of a man. They went to the scientific side of the equation, and they tried to figure out how much energy your brain could compute or generate. Well, there's enough energy in your brain to run a 2-watt bulb if it's connected properly. Realizing that that was an untapped source of mind control, and that what they were trying to do is control the masses, they began to investigate. They started by just strapping little diodes on your head and putting tape over it, and then trying to get your mind to activate an oscilloscope, which is an electric monitor that shows on the screen how much energy you are putting out. They realized that that was not really as accurate as it should be. So then they had an idea that they created I call it a colander-like metal colander hat that looks like it had spark plugs screwed in it. And they put it on people's heads, and they made sure that it was firm, very firm, good contact, indention of the skin contact. And then they wired that colander back to the oscilloscope. And you know what? They began to get activity. Then they decided that maybe they should go a little deeper. So then they drilled holes in people's heads and inserted probes in their brain to see if they could track mental and neurological energy being passed through the body and into the brain. Well, after a while, it brings us to the lesson we're teaching here today. Brain-computer interface. They realized that if they could control the mental energy in a person, then they could use it and channel it for their good. And here's what they've done. Now, I'm not going to throw this all at you. I'll come back next broadcast and I'll lay this out very clearly. They found out through trillions of dollars worth of research, and believe me, they have an unlimited budget. In fact, if you look at the new budget that Mr. Biden proposes, he's putting an unlimited amount of money in DARPA for research such as this. We had bright young scientists that came by. We had a guy named Elon Musk that came by. We had others just as gifted, just as talented. And the government started giving them grants under the disguise of helping Alzheimer's or AIDS or even cancer. Because you see, they didn't have to account to anyone. That's one of the problems we had with the pandemic, they claim, is that money went through different organizations with no accountability. We don't know who they paid or what they paid. But somewhere in all of this, Elon Musk came up with what he calls the Neuralink. Now, hang on. You go into surgery and you have AI, which is artificial intelligence, that operates a surgeon that is mechanical, that is robotic, and they put probes in your brain at precise spots and precise depth, and then they hook those probes to what I call a Cat5 or terminal that is impregnated into your skull, and then they plug that plug with a cable into an interface with a computer. You say, Brother Good, what are they doing plugging people into computers, plugging their brains into computers? They have found, after millions and billions of dollars being invested, that if you put the right diode or the right probe in the right place, that you can interact with a computer, and hang on, hooked to the internet. How would you like to be hooked to Google 24 hours a day? You think it, there it is. You don't need a screen because one thing that happens with these diodes, it hits the optical nerves and it projects the information you're requesting mentally through telekinetic request into the computer. It projects that on the back of your left retina. And it works just like the screen in a fighter jet. You're riding down the road, you're thinking, where's the closest Denny's? Without saying a word, you just think it, where's the closest Denny's? Boom, up behind your left eye, pops the screen. Go 2 blocks, turn right, go 3 blocks, pull into the parking lot. Science fiction? Hang on. Then they found out, because remember, DARPA invented the internet and Bluetooth. That was the origin. Then they found out that without being connected to the computer, if you had the right diodes in your brain, generated now by the electricity that your brain creates, you could be wireless. That means that war fighters going to war could have documentation, they could have information, they could have intelligence given to them as they're on the battlefield. That's collected by satellites. No need for a radio, no need for someone to be wondering what's going on. You can see it. Then something else. And we'll get back to all this in another broadcast. I know this is so much for you to understand right now. But the thing that I feel that will affect the church the most is they have created a program that they put into that computer that puts it into your brain. And remember now, you're wireless, you're sitting there beside your family, you're eating dinner, you're driving down the road, you're at work. They have found that they can create memory or erase memory. Now, this was funded under the guise of helping people with Alzheimer's or onset dementia. Really, it was geared for weaponizing men and women around the world, all for the same cause, without having to worry about them being compromised. In fact, I was told by a source in the military that they are doing this already on some of the agents that they send into foreign countries. They can teach a man a new language in 2 hours with all the nuance and all of the accent that he needs to be accepted as a local. Total different language. They can also create memories, whether they be fond or whether they be combatant. They can change the way you think. You say, well, okay, I can understand that, but what's that got to do with the church? In the last days, the Bible said the abomination of desolation would manifest itself, and he would be worshiped by all. He would be accepted by all. He would be seen by all. Now, we used to think that that meant satellite imagery. We used to think it might be holograms. Now, with this technology, if they can get everyone qualified to receive these signals, they can control the minds of the world. They can make you forget the telltale signs of Scripture that give us an advantage on what's coming and who might be in control. They can erase all that. They can erase the fact that you are an American. They can erase your patriotism. They can put a hatred in your heart for somebody you've never met. All of these things can be done with this probe. Elon Musk has created a technique he calls the neural lace. It looks like a hairnet over the brain, and it has several diodes in it. He's demonstrated it on animals. They have a monkey that they trained with the neural cable or the neural link, and now he has the neural lace, and he sits there, watches a screen, and plays video games without touching the keyboard, just with his mind. Elon Musk said this, that we will be speaking and communicating with primates before the year is out, because they have taught the monkey English through the diodes or through the neural net, neural lace. If they can control the world's thoughts, they can control the world. I'm not going to go any further. This is more than a lot of you wanted to absorb right now. But I will tell you this. Everything I've told you is not cutting edge. It's old news in the science department. I talked to scientists that developed nanobots in 2000 that they could put 1 million on the head of a pin. Now, what's a nanobot? It's a self-assembling digit of a computer that, when injected in your body, goes to a designated area and is activated by, hang on it, wait for it, microbursts from 5G technology. Some of which you already have in your pocket, your purse, or in your hand. It's called an iPhone. We'll get back to that. Those of you that are watching this, if you appreciate what we're doing, if you like what you're hearing or dislike it, but you want to find out more, please go to jphim.org. Go to the PayPal buttons and follow the bouncing ball. We need your help. There's hours of research. There's hours of interviews that I have here. I am not trying to be a pundit. I'm trying to tell you what God is showing me. The Antichrist will rule the world by controlling the minds of the people. Otherwise, why will every knee bow before him? And why will church leaders and people that have been Christians all their life? And he said, the very elect, unless I shorten the time, will be not dead, not wounded, deceived. Like I said, one of the programs they developed for Alzheimer's is they can add memory or they can take it away. They can create memory that you have nothing whatsoever to relate to, but in your mind it's just as strong as your first kiss, the first time you told someone you love them, or your greatest sorrow. They can create all of that without you knowing, because you have been forced to take injections with nanobots in them. And we'll get into that later. If you want to help us, JPHIM, we need your help. We need your prayers. If you'll look at the bottom of the screen, I'll put the address up there for you, jphim.org. Please share this with someone. They need to go back and look at BCI 1, BCI 2. This will be BCI 3. And that builds up to what we're talking about. I'm not trying to frighten you, but it's my responsibility, according to the Word of God. If I have something to take to the people to warn them, it's my responsibility to do that. Do you know what happened to the watchman on the wall if he fell asleep and the enemy came? After the battle, if he was not killed, they stoned him as a traitor because he did not fulfill his job of warning the people. Stay with us. Our next broadcast, I'll get into how they are conquering the fears of the public and how they are mandating things that must be not just in America. This is worldwide. This is a plan by the globalists to control the minds of the world all at once when the beast would come to power. I love you. I thank God for you. I'm praying for you. May God bless you. May God bless America. And may the voices of the church be heard in the streets. We will not lay down. We will stand up for what is good, godly, and patriotic. I love you. Have a good day. I'll see you in a bit.